Good evening and welcome to League of Women Voters Presents. I'm Jim Robertson and our topic tonight is the collateral consequences of felony convictions. My guest tonight is Judge Gary Oxenhandler. He's a senior judge now from the 13th Circuit. And Gary, I want to start out with a few things we do know, and that is the population in Missouri prisons, around 35,000 Missourians in state prisons. We know that about 50% of those people are African American. We know that according to the Department of Corrections that about 97% of them will at some point be returned to their communities or Missouri communities in general. And we know that the myriad hurdles that they face on reentry into society include, and not the least of which is employment. It makes it tough. I did some work with Job Point. I know you're familiar with that.
I am.
Not-for-profit that does job training for difficult populations. And when I saw their work with the prison population, with the reentry population, I decided that a felony conviction was much like a life sentence.
I think that's a fair statement, and we're here to talk about collateral consequences, and those are those consequences, those disadvantages, those penalties that our society, our Missouri society, our national society imposes on people who have criminal convictions, particularly felonies. I think the first things we think about are like loss of voting rights or the inability to serve on a jury, which are both pretty important parts of our civil rights. Mm-hmm. You can't vote for as long as you are under the auspices of probation and parole, incarcerated or on probation or parole, and you can never serve on a jury in Missouri. I'm astounded by that. I know that's the law, and we abide by it.
Right.
But
I was, until I did some research for this show, I was under the impression you permanently lost your voting right, but that's not true. As soon as you are released from probation and parole, your right to vote is restored.
That's correct.
That's not true for serving on a jury?
On a jury, that's correct. Which is, you know, it's something that I just don't understand after being involved in the system for as long as I have. We vet our jurors. Certainly, why would a person with a criminal conviction not be able to serve in a civil case? It's got nothing to do with anything. It might, but the lawyers in the court could question a person about it, and if they found that it was inappropriate, they couldn't be fair and impartial as they sat as a panel member, then they could be struck. The same rules would apply to anyone as they do to anyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, what are some of the other collateral consequences? I know you've done work with the Supreme Court's Commission on Racial and Ethnic Fairness and have written a report.
Yes, well, it's a first draft of a report. The Commission on Racial and Ethnic Fairness was created by Chief Justice Patricia Breckinridge, and she felt that we really needed to be looking at our court system for the various biases we had, and we wanted to look at it top to bottom. And there are a number of different areas: civil, criminal, judicial. I'm one of the co-chairs of the judicial subcommittee, and one of the things that we're looking at is implicit bias by judges, and the area that I'm looking at is these collateral consequences, and they apply in all areas. And for instance, in employment, the checking the box, I mean, that really is a collateral consequence. It could be that you want to run for office and you can't. It could be you want to apply for a loan and you can't. It could be you want to be on a commission and you can't. And it's very fascinating because there's a balance going on in the judicial system. The Sixth Amendment to the Constitution gives us the right to have counsel. Implicit in that is effective counsel. Counsel's got to tell you what's going to happen to you as a result of if you plead guilty. Mm-hmm. But there really isn't a great job done because there are so many collateral consequences that if you started communicating that to your clients, it would be too much to handle. In Missouri, there are over 600 statutes that impact as collateral consequences, and another 300 to 500 in the federal system. And there's been a change in recent years, and that is there's a case called Padilla, versus Kentucky, a U.S. Supreme Court case, where a guy was convicted. He entered a plea of guilty to a drug charge, and he was an illegal alien. But he was advised that the plea of guilty would not impact upon his staying in the country, and in fact it did. Now, immigration status was always deemed to be a collateral consequence. After that case, no. Now, if you go into the courtroom, one of the questions that the judge will ask the defendant is, do you understand that this plea of guilty may negatively impact upon your rights to stay in the United States? But all of these other things, the court doesn't have to inquire, counsel doesn't have to inquire, and even if they could, there are too many collateral consequences out there. You could almost just say, bad things are going to happen to you the rest of your life as a result of this felony plea, particularly a felony plea.
What are, you say there are 400 in state law and 600?
More than that, 600 in our Missouri
federal,
state law.
600, okay, hundreds.
Hundreds.
What are some of the more common ones?
Well, we talk about jury and voting, and we talk about employment and commissions, and then everything is just about those the right to possess a weapon, the right, the keeping you out of a neighborhood, putting you on a registry, a sex offense registry, so that anybody, and you know, some of these things are appropriate. It's not to suggest that a violent criminal should be kept from weapons, or a sex offender. We should know where those individuals are to make our community safe. But there are all these other things that are just beating down this population, this 97% that are coming back out into the community. And we always think about these reintegration programs. I mean, that's been a key in judicial thinking for a long period of time. How do we get people from, one, maybe not going back to the old neighborhood, getting them a good place, educating them, trying to get ready through Job Point to get a job, supporting them with our alternative sentencing courts. We're getting smarter in a lot of areas, but it's just going to be an ongoing process. What do we do about it? Really, the only way is maybe through a pardon sometimes, but that's a number that's so insignificant. I mean, it has no meaning.
I guess, you know, if we believe in rehabilitation, then we have to do something about the collateral consequences.
I think we believe in rehabilitation for our kids and our nephews and our friends' kids, but I don't think we believe in rehabilitation for everybody else's kids.
Yeah.
You know, it's, if I fall down the steps, it's tragedy, and if you fall down the steps, it's comedy.
Yeah. Now, these consequences are built into the criminal code, is that right?
No, they're not really. Well, some are built into the criminal code. You have direct consequences. If you are convicted of a felony, you enter a plea of guilty, your sentence is a direct consequence. The fact that you may be on probation, the fact that you may go for a 120-day program, the fact that you may have to complete an alternative sentencing program, those are all direct consequences, understandable, and there's really no issue with regard to them. It's these other untold numbers that are out there that, and we talked a little bit about Michelle Alexander's relatively new book, The New Jim Crow. I sent you a paragraph or so from that, and you know, it's a story of a beatdown that's been going on for hundreds of years. Whether it was you were a slave and you didn't have the right to vote, or the Klan kept you from voting, or the poll taxes kept you from voting, or your criminal conviction keeps you from voting. I mean, the right to vote, that's the most basic civil right there is. That's out the window, at least for a term certain. And
I think in many states it's permanent.
Well, in some states it may be permanent. I wouldn't doubt that. We're not the most conservative state, the most liberal state. I think that all the states have foibles, and I think that we're trying to look at different ways of ameliorating the impact of these collateral consequences. And some of those things take place before the judge. Judge, could you make this part of your order in this case, that this doesn't happen? Or some states are setting up applications so that you can abate the impact. But otherwise, it's a hard road to plow. The pardon is the way that you get to vote.
The
The pardon
absolute
is the
way.
way that you get to be on a jury. And once again, those are your opportunities and chances of getting that done are very small.
Right, and all this research is in your report.
Well,
your
there's a lot
draft.
talking about, what other states are doing, talking about their
Right.
recovery programs and applications that you can make to the court to expunge a record or to give a statement of good standing. Jim now we're 10 years out and he's been employed and he's improved himself and he's a good man and taking care of his family. And we need to have a certificate for him so that when he goes to his employer, he can say, I'm on the good guy list now.
Mm-hmm. And is that a recommendation? Does your report make recommendations?
Not at this point.
I see.
This is sort of the first step in bringing things to the attention of the whole commission. And hopefully we're actually the 38th state to do this. Mm-hmm. We're not like just coming out of the box. And so much of the material, there's the national, the U.S. Department of Justice, the ABA Criminal Justice Division, they've done an inventory of all the collateral consequences. So we can go and we can look at them. And in fact, here it is. This is Missouri, and I mean, there's 5 or 6 on a page.
That's a pretty thick
and there
book.
are just hundreds of them. Yeah. And it can be everything from, working for the city in
Right.
some instances.
And banning the box.
Mm-hmm.
So can the justice system repair this itself? Is it a policies and rules issue? Is it a political issue?
It's a political issue. I think that we can go through implicit bias training for the judges, which I know has been going on at the has gone on in the summer college. It went for the rookie judges this year. It's going to be done at the fall college upcoming next month. And that, hopefully that, you like to think when you're standing in front of someone that you're not categorizing them, that you're looking at them and the life that they've led, but there's nothing deep down inside of you that's making you think one way or another. I think that that's hard to do. Mm-hmm. I think we all try and do it, and I know that all the judges have been prompted to go to the Harvard website and there's a bunch of tools there to take implicit bias testing. Mm-hmm. and see what it says about you.
Now, there are how many circuit judges and associates in the state?
I think there's 125 circuit judges. There's a little over 400 judges.
Yeah, and every one of them has to go to rookie training.
Well, when you first come on, now rookie training would be for brand new judges after January 1 of this year, or anybody that was appointed, and there would probably be 40 or 50 of them.
Judge Harris from Boone.
Judge Harris, but I don't know that Judge Harris would have gone to rookie school because he took office actually after rookie school. It's usually in February, and he came in April. But he's either gone to summer or is going to the fall college.
Okay, and every one of them goes to a college every year.
We're all obligated to go.
Yeah.
And that training will be mandatory.
Good. So that's a step.
That's a step, and I think it's an important step. And if it's going to make you think about things, and I think that that's important. It's not going to change some people's minds. Some people are just how they are. As a group, I always feel that the judges really try to do the very best that they can when they're up there. They try to listen the best they can, and they try and make decisions based upon what they have before them and the tools that they have available to them. But Ted Williams only hit 400. I don't know how much better we can do.
He's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, well, I don't know. We don't have a Judges Hall of Fame, I don't think.
Maybe you should.
Well, maybe we should.
Can you recall in your own career, and you've heard a bunch of cases, afterward thinking, well, I let my implicit bias into that?
I don't think that I ever thought of it that way. I have always, and was always a sequential thinker. And I always wanted to make sure that when number 10 case came before me, that when I got to 23, that I wasn't worn out, that I wasn't tired, that I wasn't upset by number 22. And if I felt that was going on, I left the courtroom. Mm-hmm. And so when I made decisions, I felt that I thought through them at that point in time. But you know, I'm sure I screwed up. I mean, we can't. It's like, how do you deal with your kids? You know, you try and make good decisions, and we're all fools and idiots. And I think regardless of how hard we try, that's just how we are. There have been times where I've gone back and thought, well, I didn't think that through. I never thought I did it because of race or sex or religion. I would be so upset with myself if I did that. Now, whether there's something implicit there, you know, I can't control every aspect of my subconscious. But if I have gone back and looked at things, and once in a while I did something different. And a lot of times I said to myself, I did okay on that. You know, this was just a horrible circumstance, and I did the best I could and worked through it.
So I would think it's an incredibly hard job. You're holding the fate of a lot of people in your hands, really.
It is. And as I said, there are a lot of people that it's the kind of job that you can either do it or you can't do it. There are a lot of people that are judges that are very torn up over almost every decision, and it's hurtful to them. It doesn't mean they made bad decisions. It just means everyone grinds their heart away. And that, so.
That's tough. So, well, what else do you want to talk about as far as collateral consequences?
Well, I think that the training is important, and I think the training is important to everyone, even if it's simply think about what I'm doing and am I basing it on, you know, the facts before me, or am I thinking because this is a white person and I don't like white persons, or African American or a Muslim, or I don't like their shirt. You know, things like that. And I know that in my courtroom, people have come before me and I don't like some aspect of how they're dressed. And I know that it's disrespectful, but I also know that it will eat on me during the time that I'm dealing with them. And I will usually call a timeout in the case and reset it and have them come back and mention to them why I'm concerned. So that's not an issue clouding my mind as I make my decisions or made my decisions. I think, so the ongoing training is real important, and I think a lot of it's in the legislature's hands. And since the very first figures that you gave, you know, and I used to have them all in my head, but I haven't for several months, but the figures you gave aren't bad. I will tell you that in 2013, I did the report for the Sentencing Advisory Commission, and at that time, the state of Missouri was incarcerating African Americans at 4.5 or 4.7 times the rate of whites. The national average was 4.5. In 2014, our average dropped to about 4.4. The national average stayed at 4.5. So, you know, we've begun to talk about those things. When I served as chair, I was trying to put out material regularly to get judges and prosecutors and public defenders and legislators to think about these kind of things. Everybody's really concerned now about the cost of incarceration. I mean, we have so many thousands of people in, so many thousands under probation, under the auspice of probation and parole. We got to do something about it. And that because we can't fill potholes. And it's my feeling that when you can't fill potholes, then people do stuff about it.
Yeah, I think the number I saw was 47,000 under probation and parole.
That number may be right. That seems even a little light, but that may be correct. As once again, I had them in my head, but you should have reminded me, and I would have looked them up before I got here.
You're right, but if they're my numbers, they got to be right.
Yeah, no, they're perfect. We do agree with this. They're astoundingly high. No one can palate those numbers. I mean, it's just inappropriate. We shouldn't be doing that. There's something wrong with the system. We've got to change it. It is legislative. It's not judicial. And we know that we have legislative stalemate in this state, and we have legislative stalemate almost in every state, and we have it in the United States. And until people start understanding that we got to figure out some answers here, that we've got to cross over lines and start agreeing about the problems that we have, they're just not going to go away.
Let me ask you a related question about...
I'm sorry if I got a little heated there.
No, you're perfect. Public defender system.
Yes.
Tremendously overworked,
yes,
underfunded. I can't even fathom the number of cases each public defender has. Hundreds.
Yes.
Why can't we fix that piece of it?
I don't understand. You know that when I was presiding judge back in 2008, 2000, around in there, I dealt with the public defender crisis that was going on, and I was the judge in the state that first ordered private counsel in this area. And it was interesting because a lot of the people that belong to the Boone County Bar work in Jeff. And I know that it was very interesting, and I won't, but I appointed, it was just randomly how they were appointed. And someone got appointed and they worked for a significant legislator. And I got a call from 2 legislators and said, can we come over and talk? It was the first time that I had ever gotten a call like that. And they said, can we come over and talk with you? And I said, well, I was on a Monday. And I said, well, I'm in court, coming out of court right now. I got to go back on the bench at 1:30, be here at 1 o'clock. And they said, we'll be there. And they came and they talked. Now, and they were from opposite sides of the fence. And those are the kind of discussions that we need to have. I mean, the public defender needs more funds. That's all there is to it. And if they don't, it's a throwback to 1973 when I was practicing, when there really wasn't anyone to appoint, and that they would call me up and they would say, Oxenhandler, you're on this case, come on up. And really didn't think anything about it. That's just how it was. And then the public defender system was developed, and it's a great system. And you know, it's interesting that so many people, defendants, lament the fact that they're being represented by a public defender. They're some of our best attorneys. There's no one that has more experience than the public defenders. There's no one that tries more cases than the public defenders.
Yeah.
And it's hard to look at the number of cases that they have, because you could go to a private counsel and they could have 100 cases too. It's a different, the public defenders don't exercise a lot of control over their cases. And in addition to that, since clients are not paying them money, client control is an issue for them. It's a multiplicative impact for the public defenders. They need more money, that's all there is.
Is there a potential federal intervention?
Yeah, I think that's happened around. I think that it'll happen, that it'll take a federal lawsuit. And it'll be the same thing that occurred back again in the mid-'70s when all the lawsuits were brought with regard to the jail facilities, deciding that you had to have so many cubic feet per person. It changed everything. So that's the way it's going to go. And unless, you know, and that's not to say that our legislators don't try and make good decisions, but everybody knows we're at stalemate.
Yeah, I believe the governor has held some money that was appropriated for the system.
And I don't know, you know, we never know. Maybe as a journalist, you know the devil of the details. I don't. I just know they needed the funds, they didn't get them, there was a reason why it wasn't done. It's beyond me. I'm just a circuit court judge, a senior circuit court judge.
That's right. So another point that I'd like to inquire about is private prisons in Missouri.
I don't like it. I think that we've demonstrated in Boone County that you can run a good jail system. And I don't know if you've been in there or had the chance to go through, but
just visiting, but
just visiting.
Yeah.
I assume that. I was on the jail visitors committee, chaired that for about a dozen years up until I don't know, the mid-'90s. And we regularly looked at the facilities, and the old jail that we had where the courthouse was a horrid place. Yeah. And it's just changed around. So jail facilities, you know, that's a real issue.
Yeah, we have a first class jail facility now.
Right.
But lots of counties surrounding us
are poor, a lot of problems. I know Callaway, part of our circuit, is working on upgrading theirs. Yeah, Howard. And so we're going to need to, I mean, literally the jails in the 70s were dungeons. Would you be in favor of, as on the federal level, taking the private prisons away from the mix? Well, I think that once you introduce the profit motive in, when you're talking about a class of individuals, a general class of individuals that are incarcerated, their hot dogs are going to get a little bit smaller, and their cheese crackers are going to get a little bit less, and the milk will probably become skim milk, and I think all of those things will happen. And I think that we're seeing it happen, and it happens in every area where we introduce a profit motive into our governmental system. And I just have, notwithstanding how good it all starts in the beginning, it ends up failing in the end. Because and the people that are going to be played upon and preyed upon are those people that have the least in all of our society, those people that are our prisoners. So, you know, there are a lot of people that think much differently about that. Well, we can reduce our costs, but usually it doesn't work out. You don't get the same quality of people. You know, I know that, for example, when Dwayne Carey was going through, we were about 6 months ago, we had to close down one of the pods in the jail because we didn't have enough staff. It took a long time to get staff simply because of the vetting that he does of his staff, to make sure that and the tests that he runs to make sure that he's got quality, honest, hardworking people in there. You can't just put anybody into that jail system, or you're going to be introducing all sorts of bad things into the system.
Stresses, that's right.
That you don't want to have.
And Dwayne Carey is the Boone County Sheriff.
And Dwayne Carey is the Boone County Sheriff, and really does, he and his crew do a heck of a job with their facility out there. Numbers are high right now, I'll bet.
Well, and we only have about a minute left, but I wanted to mention one other statistic that may or may not be true, and you could shed light on this.
Oh, don't point at me, Jim.
The percentage of Black Missourians in the population is about 50%, and what I read was about 40% of those are drug offenders. Does that ring true?
Well, I could only give you an overall figure. I mean, I would tell you that in the, say, 300 to 500 felons that I would sentence annually in the last 5 or 6 years, prior to that it was more like 500 or 600, that in above 90% of the cases, drugs were involved in some fashion. Not necessarily in the offense, but bringing those defendants to the table in some fashion, either the family they grew up in, or the neighborhood they lived in, or the act that they engaged in. I mean, it is just all over the place. We've got to grow our alternative sentencing courts. We've got to really pay attention. Heroin's a really bad problem right now, and we're just learning how to deal with it. We've got a lot of people dying after we think we're doing something for them when they're in the heroin circle.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Maybe we can come back and talk again sometime.
I always say yes to you and to the league.
You haven't always said yes to me,
Okay,
but
well,
I
that's
won't point
true.
at you.
No, that's true. That's true. I do recall a time or two where I said no.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us tonight. Until next time, goodbye.